Mayor Amschel Rothschild came from a more than wealthy family in Europe centuries ago, I think. Made the statement, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes the laws." And let's think about this for a second. If you control a country's money supply, why would you care who makes the laws? You control everything anyways, and if you control the money supply, any laws you need altered, you can pay to have done. I mean, what drives human beings? Greed, lust, fear, happiness, joy, faith. But when you really think about it, most people are pretty corrupt. It's a corrupt world we live in. The two most motivating factors, I believe, are fear and greed. So, if you control the money supply, you pretty much have complete control over fear and greed, which pretty much gives you complete control over everything and everybody. So, we have basically the United States Treasury, who's like the accounting department of the country. A lot of people think that the IRS is the accounting department of the country. In some ways they are, but really just on the tax section. Now, let's think about this. Even if you're an employee and you give half your money away to the government, which is why I don't recommend being an employee and working for other people, but that's another topic. But even if you're an employee and say you pay, 40, 45%, 50% in taxes, it's a lot of money. But your income is 100% of what you make. So the Treasury, they control debt, which pretty much is what the whole economy operates on. I mean, think about someone who makes $80,000 a year, but they have a mortgage for $400,000. They have 2 car payments. They owe $30,000 on each loan there. They got $50,000 in credit card debt, $75,000 in student loans. I mean, okay, and maybe you're thinking I'm exaggerating there. I'm not, but, it's probably actually fairly common, maybe even average. But let's say somebody makes $30,000 a year. They have 1 car payment they owe $10,000 on. They have $15,000 in student loans. They have $5,000 in credit card payments. I mean, you can see that they're operating on debt. $30,000 a year just isn't enough to pay that. They have a $150,000 mortgage. And you add up all their debt, and you're talking a decade worth of their wages. So you can see that the market that we all live on is really driven by the debt that we can create. It's way bigger than our wages. That's messed up. That's another topic as well, though. What I'm getting at is that the Treasury controls the debt, the wages. They're the actual accountants for all the money, the GDP, the productivity created in monetary value of the country. So you have the United States Treasury, and you have the Federal Reserve, which is a private entity that creates money, and then you have the ultra-rich. And they're kind of like a triangle, really, those three. And they work together. And the ultra-rich got together and formed the Federal Reserve. They actually just had their 100th anniversary. In fact, they celebrated, I think about 2 months ago, a month and a half, 2 months ago, on Jekyll Island, which is where they formed the meeting in 1910 to create it. And they celebrated 100 years. Seems like a long time ago, but it's really not. And they celebrated the creation of the Federal Reserve. So the ultra-rich created the Federal Reserve, who then made a deal with the Treasury, and so you basically have this triangle that controls all the money and controls the nation's wealth. So what did Mayor Amschel Rothschild said? He said, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes the laws." It's about power. It's about control. You know, the rich already own everything, but they basically play off of ignorance of the common people, you know, of the masses, and it's really messed up. One of the good things is that it's starting to really get exploited, you know, because the dollar's, I mean, let's face it, the dollar's dying. The dollar is a commodity, just like oil, stocks, real estate, precious metals. Currency is another commodity. It's not real money. Money, I mean, what is money? Let's define money for a second. Let's sit back and let's actually think, okay, what is money? Money is exchange in the marketplace. It's like a medium of exchange for barter, for trade, for whatever, to exchange products and exchange services. Because we all have things that we can produce and we all have things that we can serve others with, but nobody has everything and can do everything. So money is the common denominator that facilitates all trade. And so the dollar just being another commodity, just like oil or stocks or, you know, business, whatever, you know, like I was saying, or precious metals or whatever, the dollar is a commodity, and it's crashing hard. And let's face it, it's had an amazing run. I mean, 100 years is crazy. But in 1913, when the Federal Reserve was like founded and actually started printing money, they basically gained a license to print money, and you know, it was granted by the U.S. Senate and Treasury and all that. They all, you know, the people bought into it, and that's really what happened. We can't just put it on the government. I mean, let's face it. Or maybe we can. I don't know. I mean, maybe I should study that a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe the government conned everybody into thinking it was a good idea. Sure as hell wasn't a good idea. But they got a license to print money, and so they've had a great run. For 100 years, they've been able to print their own money. I mean, the ultra-rich have printed their own money, and right now, I mean, it's really getting what's getting exploited is that the system's flawed. The pinpoints of the problems I don't really see getting exploited yet much. Ron Paul's doing a fascinating job of trying to do that, but he's one man, and until people want to listen to what he has to say, you know, I mean, I'm all for the power of one, don't get me wrong. And Ron Paul, if there's a guy that can do it, I believe in Ron Paul, but, you know, we need more people like him. You know, the Robert Kiyosakis of the world, the Glenn Becks of the world, the Joshua Gaymans of the world. We need more of these. We need a lot more of these. We need people to actually care and listen to what they have to say and tell their friends and families and neighbors and coworkers and anybody that'll listen. And so they've had this 100-year run of being able to print their own money, and what's going on right now, in my opinion, is that they're printing more money because, I mean, let's face it, the last 100 years has been the biggest boom ever, especially since 1971 when President Nixon took the dollar off of the gold standard. See, they used to print dollars, the Federal Reserve, but they could only print so much in relation to how much gold existed, because they were issuing the dollars to the Treasury, and the Treasury could only have so many dollars printed based on how much gold they had in reserves. Well, then they told everybody to turn in their gold under Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 30s. I think it was 33 or 35. I think 1933. This is during the Depression. They had everybody turn in their gold. They actually said if you were caught with gold coins, that it was punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, which back then was a shit ton of money. And so then they could print more money based on how much gold they had. And then in 1971, they just nixed that whole gold standard. So now they can just print as much money as they wanted. Didn't have anything to do with gold or any other commodity. They just print the hell out of as much as they want. Well, that created the biggest boom in history, because all of a sudden they created all this money, because the money's there. As long as people believe that it's there, it's there. Until the manipulation of the currency, corrects itself, which is getting into like Austrian economics and stuff. Not Keynesian, because, God forbid. I mean, Keynesian economics, I'm sure they're all for it, but if you study economics right now, I don't think you'll have a whole lot of faith in Keynes or Keynesian economics. But they've had this run, and so now it's like, okay, well, people are like fat quickly at a fast, rapid pace catching on that something's wrong. The dollar's crashing, and so they're injecting more money in. The same thing that like got us into this mess, they're doing more of. Well, why would they do that? I think because we issued them a license to print as much money as they wanted to. What would you do if you got a license to print as much money as you wanted to, and that was going all good? You would probably try to keep it cool to print as much money as you could and to increase your wealth as much as you could without becoming so blatant and obvious and greedy that everyone caught on that you were fucking them and revoked your license. So what I think kind of happening is that they've been printing all this money for 100 years with their license to print money, the Federal Reserve, granted by the U.S. Treasury, all thought of by the ultra-rich, remember the triangle. And people are catching on right now, and I think they see the dollar's crashing, and I think they're seeing their window getting smaller, the window of opportunity. Because what are they going to do once? I have my theory of what they're going to do once it crashes for the next wave. I think it gets into revelations and prophecy and biblical things. I'll get into that in a second, but my point here is that with the dollar crashing, what would you do at the very end? If you thought everyone was catching on, you were going to have if you could print money, you had a license to print money, and you thought that you were going to get your license revoked, what would you do in that time? You'd print as much money as you could. So what are they doing right now? Quantitative easing, bailouts. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars are getting injected into the economy. And think about it. If they inject $1 trillion into the economy, and that money gets redeposited, every time a dollar gets deposited, 10 times gets lent out. So if you have $1,000, you deposit $1,000 into the bank lends out $10,000. Well, somebody gets that $10,000, and what do they do with it? They probably deposit it. So they deposit that $10,000 back into the bank, and then they'll end up spending it. But that $10,000 still got deposited, and once it got deposited, the bank then loaned out another $100,000. What happened to $100,000? Somebody got their hands on it, and they deposit that, start spending, but the $100,000 that got deposited created another $1 million. And that $1 million gets deposited, $10 million, $100 million, $1 billion, $10 billion, $100 billion. And you can see that how the money supply is just, gets huge. And it is exponentially increasing right now. I did another video on this. And that's what's going to lead to hyperinflation, which will be the end of the dollar. Which has been the end of every currency that hasn't been attached to a gold standard or since the beginning of time. Rome, Germany, There's actually been dozens of countries. If you Google hyperinflation, Google end of currency, I mean, you'll find tons. Just in the last 100 years. Just in the last 50 years. But you can go back to the beginning of ancient civilizations. I mean, currencies that haven't been attached to anything. Rome was a big one. This is what many economists argue that was the fall of the Roman Empire. And so, as the dollar dies, they're trying to print as much money as they can, so that while they're doing that, they can gain as many assets as they can. Because as they print money, debt gets created. And when debt gets created, assets get collateralized, and the ultra-rich get that collateral. I mean, what's happening right now? People are losing all their homes. Well, the bank's sitting on these homes. What happens if the banks go under? I mean, they're responsible to a bigger bank, to an insurance company, to the government. These assets, somebody claims possession of these assets, and it's the ultra-rich that are right now taking all the marbles. So, you know, my goodness. It's time that the people, we're way bigger than the Treasury, you know, than the Federal Reserve, than the ultra-rich. You know, I mean, we're talking the ultra-rich in less than 1% of the world's population, probably less than 0.1% of the world's population, are the true elitists. You know, and the people can easily overrun them, but these people with all the money, they control the governments, they control the courts, they control the militaries, they control the trade, so they really control the shit. And we need to start reclaiming our assets. You know, I think at some point it's going to get to the point where people are going to say enough's enough, and, you know, when people come to take their house or take their business or take their possessions, you know, they're going to put a bullet in their fucking head. But the ultra rich have always been smart, and they're still smart, and, you know, what are they going to do to stop that from happening? Now I'm getting to the point I said I was going to get back to in a little bit, 5 minutes ago. What I think they're going to do as the dollar crashes, right now they're printing as much money as they can before their license is revoked. Their license will be revoked by the dollar crashing to zero and hyperinflation stemming. And when this happens, understand that all world currencies are attached to the dollar. Since 1944, the Bretton Woods Act was passed, and they said it was in response to the global economic catastrophe that World War II caused. But really what happened was they pegged everything to the dollar. So the euro, the yuan, the euro wasn't around back then, I'm sorry, but the yuan, all the other nations' currencies, sorry for not naming more, off the top of my head right now I can't think of the name of all of them. I think the franc was already dead by then, but all of the global currencies of the world were attached to the dollar, and still are today. And then in 71, when they nixed the dollar from the gold standard, then you have this monopoly currency, which is what the dollar is, and that's what everything's attached to. So as that dies, it's going to kill a lot of, it's going to cause a global catastrophe. What I think the world bankers will do, the elitists, the ultra-rich, is I think they will create a global currency. And this is what I was talking about with the biblical stuff and the prophecy and all that stuff, the revelation, is that they'll create a global currency. And this is when we'll start seeing the chips implanted into people, to use as their money. Because why carry a debit card? Why carry cash on you? If you can just have a chip implanted in you and scan that at the counters. I remember talking about this stuff when I was like 8 years old with somebody from church. That this was, Hollywood, some Christian organization did a movie based on what they thought revelations could look like in a modern day society, and they talked about this happening. I can really see it happening now, and it's scary. Maybe it won't happen exactly like that. I don't know, and I probably need to do a lot more studying into the book of Revelation to really be making biblical claims on any of this. But I'm just saying, my point in bringing all of that stuff up is that, I mean, this is trippy stuff. Like, dots are connecting here. And so with a global currency, if they create a global currency, if the dollar crashes, they have to do something. They got to get something that everyone's going to believe in. So if they create a global currency and get the world to believe in that currency and use that as a medium of exchange, which will be not attached to any type of gold or silver or anything tangible, it'll just be attached to debt like the dollar has been now, it'll create another boom bigger than the boom we've seen since 1971. If you look, 1971 to 2007, biggest boom in history, exponentially bigger than any boom. I think the next boom will be that much bigger, which will be good because it'll be short term. It'll be good. Long term. It's scary. It's revelation. It could be the end of the world, but short term, it might be the last big end run of everything. So now you have a global currency that people believe in, global, attached to nothing, which means we're going to see derivatives upon derivatives upon derivatives of debt, which means there's going to be all this. It's like playing the game of Monopoly, and all of a sudden it's like you take all of the money from 7 board games of Monopoly, but play one game of Monopoly, and add a 0 to everything in the game. So if the rent's $10, instead that rent's $100. So now if you own Boardwalk and Park Place and have hotels on both of them, and somebody lands on it, it was $2,000 rent that they had to pay. Now it's $20,000. That's kind of what they're doing. It's like right now we're in one game of Monopoly, but when they go to that global currency based on debt, it'll be like whoever owns Boardwalk and Park Place and someone lands on that, they pay $20,000. When you pass go, instead of getting $200, you get $20,000, or $2,000, or a lot of money. You can see my point. They're just adding zeros to the whole game. So would create a big wave in the short term, and that's what I think they'll do to keep everything going. But it's scary. It's really scary, because one world currency could mean one world courts, one world military, and I don't see how anybody could think that any of that's a good idea. At all. And that's mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. So I'm going to put this video out on the internet, and we'll see who wants to listen. If you want to share it, share it. We'll see what happens. We'll see if any of this philosophy or theory comes true. But I study this stuff a lot. I do a lot of research. I'm genuinely interested in it. I'm actually passionate about it. And the real reason why is because I'm passionate about people. And people are so smart. And if we, as the people, who are 99.9% of the population, understand what's going on, maybe we can alter this in some way. Or at least, even if we can't alter it, at least maybe I can influence more people to see through the evilness and the greed and the fear that they're trying to create, and for people to see what's real. My motto is real. Obama's was change we can believe in, or change. Mine's real. Let's be real. So call me out on my bullshit if you have bullshit to call me out on, but at least put it out there so we can all talk about it, be real, create some type of solution together. Look, I don't think there's a solution to all this, just a quick solution where, everything's great, but the more people that are trying, that are putting their heads together, the more people we can influence, the more lives can get better and can get, you know, saved from the darkness. And that's really ultimately what we need.